Kia ora, I'm Alicia. I'm a social worker from Stand to Maya, and I work in the Manaaki team.
Kia ora e te whānau, ko aroha tēnei. My current role is as a facilitator for Stop Services. Tika.
Kia ora koutou, Colin Jansen te whenua. I'm the Prevention Education Lead with the Stop Services.
When and how do I start talking about private parts and safe boundaries with my child?
So I feel like I did hear some of this kōrero a little bit earlier, but it's really quite important to continue reinforcing starting early. As my fellow colleagues mentioned, there's no longer a big chat. I think that notion probably should have gone with the dinosaurs. So just remembering that our children have lots of access to different media on lots of different types of devices. We've got to think about what is coming in and how that may be transmitting for them. So when it comes down to private parts, I think we talk about their gorgeous little bodies as infants. We're like, oh, look at your delicious little fingers, look at your wee toes, and we identify those things in a really loving and affectionate way. And then for some reason or another, we get to genitalia and either we just skip over it, you don't have any genitals at all, or it comes with an uncomfortable notion. So for our children to be really confident in themselves, I think, as hard as it is, we really need to challenge ourselves to be really honest about our anatomy, because our bodies do really wonderful things, and so do our genitals. So to talk about that in a young age in a non-shaming way, maintaining everybody's mana is really helpful. But I do understand that for adults, it's hard. It's really challenging, and I think that naturally our language evolves. I think when I started my parenting journey, it was a front bum, I think, if I recall. It was a bottom and a front bum.
Front body and your back body.
Yeah, I was like, okay. Yeah, but, it wasn't until one of my wee babes fell on the bar and she said, oh, I hurt my front bum. And I'm like, oh, okay, so what part of your body is that? And so it was really not very helpful that I had to find it that way, but that was the language that I had. Turned out that she had actually slipped on something and hurt her internal part of her body, which is her vagina. So it wasn't her vulva, it was her vagina, and that was actually really important for her to be able to tell me, because how else can I help? So just in regards to common sense and being able to assist our children well physically and without shame, I think that conversation needs to start really early. But our encouragement, the rationale for our encouragement is that actually historically children have tried to disclose harm to adults, and the adults have not been able to understand their communication. So when you're calling your vulva or your vagina a pocketbook or a cookie or a flower, and you're asking somebody to help you because you don't want things to keep happening in that space, and the adults can't understand you, they can't assist. So as Lynn said earlier, the statistics of harm in our country are really high. So though we know that children, as humans, we're sexual beings, and we do play to process and we explore and we're curious and things are mutual, sometimes when our children are being harmed, they need help and they need it swiftly. So for us to be committed in that space, we need to be brave adults and use tricky words like penis and scrotum and anus and in the things. So
Just like forehead,
yeah,
elbow, and kneecap.
right. Yeah, we don't call these grabbers, eh? Like,
And I
I
think
was going to use my grabbers to get that. Like, actually, these are my hands, and I'm going to use my hands, and there's no shame about that. Yeah.
And we have some fun with families, like families use all sorts of words. I work with one family that will talk about willies and boobies, and another family that will, talk about your vajayjay and your vajoa, and another family that will talk about dick and dicks and tits, and another family that will talk about testicles and breasts and penises. So,
And dicks and tits always kind of makes me laugh. Like, even as an adult, you can see why kids want to have that chat at school. Because actually, well, I'm great growing, and I think it's funny. So
There's
you
often
know.
a lot of energy, isn't there?
definitely, the room erupts at our workshops.
And there's some families that actually still don't have any language, you know, and sometimes we'll hear adults talking about, you know, kind of like what happened down there. And so language is really, really important in this space. It's important for parents and caregivers to feel confident and equipped with the language. Sometimes parents and caregivers might need to practice because, you know, if we as parents and caregivers don't have the language, then that's not going to be helpful for the kids that are in our lives. So, and as Aroha said, the rationale is that why does it have to be any different from, you know, our nose, our cheek, and our knee?
There's lots of resources as well. So in regards to literature, so before coming to Scott, I worked in classrooms for about 15 years, and yeah, literature is a great tool. So even if I find if the text isn't for you or you're not happy to read aloud, like there are lots of online resources too. So if you're uncomfortable talking about what is, maybe Google can help in that sense, because once again, you have the control over what you're offering to your child. If we're talking about what they're being exposed to and what's okay and what's not, I think that once again those conversations need to start really young, because as we know, I've seen many toddlers hold devices and watch things streaming in at them, and if you're not able to supervise all of the time, how do you know that genitalia aren't flashing up in front of your kids? Because it does happen. It's happened to me on numerous occasions, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So, for our poor wee kids, and I do think about my own babes, like we check in quite regularly. So, is there anything that's popped up online that's making you feel uncomfortable or that you want to talk about, and we create a plan. And we always have from quite an early age around, if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, turn your device off, you turn the screen over, and you seek support from an adult. And then I say uncomfortable too, but actually sometimes it's confusing, and then for some children might see something and it might actually make you feel quite nice, and you're like, what is this? Like, who helps me with this? And I think it's quite important, once again, start those conversations early, because the media is coming at our children. We know that the industry of pornography is wanting our children's time. It's how they make their billions of dollars. So just not to be naive in that space. Yeah.